Chloe stood on the Windsor riverfront, where the humid air tasted of diesel and impending rain. Across the black ribbon of the Detroit River, the American skyline glowed like a furnace, its jagged towers casting long, hungry shadows toward the Canadian shore. The Ambassador Bridge, usually a vibrant artery of trade, sat paralyzed under a sky bruised by the violet hues of dusk. Inside the Gilded Lily, the atmosphere was thick with the scent of hairspray and the low, rhythmic thrum of bass that vibrated in the floorboards. Zoya sat at the cluttered vanity backstage, her face illuminated by a ring of harsh light bulbs. She leaned forward to apply a thick layer of crimson lipstick, her reflection mirroring a look of practiced indifference that didn't quite reach her eyes. On the main stage, Millie moved through the spotlight, a swirl of sequins and effortless poise. Usually, the front row regulars would be shouting, but tonight the room was eerily quiet. Their gazes were tilted upward, fixed on the flickering television mounted above the bar, where a news ticker scrolled relentlessly in urgent, jagged red letters. The music abruptly cut to static, and the club's speakers hissed with the voice of a panicked broadcaster. Chloe and Zoya emerged from the wings, standing close together as the reality of the broadcast sank in. The Annexation Act had been signed, and the maps on the screen showed the border dissolving into a new, singular shade of blue. Bastien, the club manager, appeared from the shadows of the hallway, clutching a small transistor radio as if it were a life raft. He caught Millie as she stepped off the stage, his face pale under the neon signage. He spoke in a low, frantic tone, gesturing toward the heavy steel doors that led to the alleyway. Chloe led Millie out onto the rusted fire escape to breathe. From their elevated perch, they could see the city changing in real time. On the bridge, the civilian cars had vanished, replaced by a steady, terrifying line of military vehicles, with high-beam headlights that cut through the darkness like searchlights. Back inside, Zoya retreated to a quiet corner of the dressing room, pulling a worn leather folder from her locker. She spread out her papers, visas, a passport, and old letters, realizing that the geography of her safety had been rewritten in a single afternoon. The border she had navigated so carefully was now rushing to meet her. The dressing room became a blur of motion as the girls realized the club would not be opening the next day. Chloe helped Zoya pack her things into a duffel bag, their movements synchronized by years of friendship. They avoided looking at the television, focusing instead on the tangible weight of their belongings and the silence of the empty stage. They stepped out into the Windsor night, where the air was no longer still. The streets were filled with the sound of distant sirens and the frantic murmurs of neighbors gathering on porches. Millie gripped Chloe's hand as they stepped onto the sidewalk, passing a shopkeeper who was already hammering plywood over his front window. At the edge of the river park, they paused to look across the water one last time. The skyline of Detroit seemed larger now, as if it had physically moved closer. Zoya leaned against Chloe's side, and they watched as the first American flags were hoisted onto the Canadian light posts, marking the territory of the 51st state.